Okay, so who am I to be offering this training? Good question. First of all, I'm part of a team, so it's not just me, but there are reasons that I was brought into this place, this way of being, and offering this training. Starting out with a very strong nature connection as a child, living on the beaches around Port Adelaide, and having some traumatic experiences and finding solace by running away and down to the sand dunes, and really coming back healed in ways that of course can't be explained in a child's mind. And the thing that I think that came with that for me as a small child was the stories, the Grimm brothers, you know, the fairy tales that then went on to my academic studies in mythology, and dreams. I've always had very powerful dreams that have helped me to understand something more than human. Then the usual teenage confusion, and leaving home to get away and travel the world at 19 to really break out and find myself, and coming home remembering those loves, nature and literature and philosophy. So I studied a lot of myth and symbol, the depth psychology stuff, and learned about archetypal and ancestral traditions and how we could connect with these, how we're always more than an individual. So I always had a very strong feel for that. It's becoming much more widely accepted nowadays that we've been sort of poorly socialized into believing that we're individuals in this very commodified, consumeristic way. But understanding, like Thich Nhat Hanh teaches, that we are interbeing, that we're only here because we're part of a community of people, of human souls, and also a part of a more than human community, the elements and, the mountains, the trees, birds, the oceans. So I feel like that was always coming through, and then I was afire with an insatiable appetite for stories all the way through my academic training. And again, mythology and symbolism. So I wrote a master's on dreams and how they connected us to the great myths. And while I was researching that, it was both research and creative mythopoeia, writing creative myth. What I came to see more and more was that the early myths, the first written myths, were often about connection with the more than human world. Pagan ways, mythic connections, hybrid beings, gods and goddesses that somehow came from the earth and came from the cosmos, and that we'd moved away from. And indigenous traditions speak of this very much, our animistic connection to everything that's around us, that makes us part of an ecosystem, psychologically as well as physically. So I wanted to follow that through, and I wrote a PhD on the human relationship with nature, but I grounded that in one very specific symbol, which was the symbol of light. I wanted to have a look at why I felt Christian tradition had drawn us away from our earth relationships towards this idea of the sacred or the divine residing somewhere else. I just had a strong intuition that this was not helpful, that this was a sort of mistaken step, I guess, in human culture. And I did find evidence of that, but I also found that really began in the agricultural revolution, when we started to manage resources, when we stopped thinking about trees and rivers, mountains and soil as kin, and started to think of them as things we could use, resources. We can irrigate crops with rivers, we can domesticate animals. And I think that's the big shift for me, away from kin and towards resources. So I'm consistently trying to help people to decolonize or unlearn, undo some of that socialization, because it's still very much alive. It's what the Industrial Revolution is built on, that earlier. shift away from belonging and being in love and filled with respect for the other beings that we're related to here on Earth. So that was the academic projects. Technically my PhD was an eco-critical mythography, basically looking at the big stories and again asking what went wrong. And that was some time ago now. It's more than a decade since the PhD. I felt like I needed to shift away from that critical analysis of what went wrong, the sort of the negative pole, if you like, of the project, and figure out how to get it right again. So that's where Rozak, his original writings on eco-psychology, bringing the psyche back into relationship with the ecosystem, really inspired me. And then moving on from that into ecotherapy, what do we do about that? Again, it's all very well to take note, but what do we do? What are the practices? And as a Zen practitioner, I joined the Melbourne Zen group over 20 years ago, and I've had a practice consistently ever since, having previously been a Vipassana meditator. What practice do we have that grounds us in that relationship, that makes us feel like we belong in our body and in our places, that makes us feel related to the other beings, the plants and the animals and the elements and the places? Having a practice, having a way of being and doing, and then walking that talk, taking that into the world. So not just having a practice and then a life, a job, a family, other responsibilities, whatever it is that make us think, oh, you know, those are separate. No separation. Walking that knowledge of belonging, taking that sense of being related with other beings into everyday life, into the city, into work, into family. All those things that can be very challenging. So we work in a trauma-informed way. So one of the other things that I did was became a trauma-informed carer trainer. So I would train people to deal with traumatized children in a way that was safe for those children to unfold, to grow in a way that they could gain confidence and they didn't feel like they had to jump hoops or step up to someone's expectations, but just letting them be who they are. Sure, you know, asking them to have certain behavioral standards, but doing so in a way that's always filled with love and compassion and empathy, things that come naturally for me. And it was a beautiful job to be able to do that for several years. So that's coming into the game as well, that trauma-informed care, alongside the academic background, in-depth eco-psychology, the myths and the stories, the history of civilization, as it were. The Zen practice, so that we have an awareness practice. We have exercises that actually ground this knowledge, this way of being into ourselves. Fascination with the shamanic arts. How do we open ourselves to other wavelengths of information, to the intelligence of nature all around us, the totemic teachers, the animals, the plants, the places, the voices, the more than human spiritual aspects of life, if you like. The trance dancing that can make us feel so completely alive and filled with a beautiful, liberating energy. I've definitely experimented with all those things and feel very enthusiastic about helping others to do them. And also scientific thinking. You know, I did a lot of analytical thinking during that academic period, and I stand by it. It gave me a lot. I felt like I really learnt how to carve apart the analytical part of my mind, to trust it to tell me, you need to check your facts on this. You know, to check things like New Age fantasy, spiritual bypassing, to ask myself, am I escaping something here or am I dropping into something here? Always keeping that critical thinking alive. But then again, using the awareness practices to be able to say, thank you, monkey mind, analytical, conceptual mind, machine mind. Thank you for all the good work you do. Right now, I'm just going to give you a little rest and open up the other parts of my mind, of my conceptual apparatus, of my perceptual abilities, of my cognitive frameworks, other ways of being aware. And I find when I give thanks for the critical analytical because of the good work that it does and can do for me, and ask it to take a rest, I find that can really work to drop into the more peripheral awareness, the more subtle ways of being and knowing and being informed by nature. So that's me, that's what I bring to the game. And hopefully a bit of humour and light-heartedness as well, because we need to be there with grief, with strong feelings. We don't do avoidance in ecotherapy. We do openness and embrace with love, and with care, and with a desire for spiritual liberation, for mental, psychological freedom, for emotional balance, for all the things that we can have, and that we have a birthright to enjoy these things. So really, hopefully shifting away from the wounded or crippled or, overly analytical side of ourselves, and shifting into the more open, capable, comfortable being that we can be. That's enough from me. That's hopefully enough for you to trust me to take you on this journey of ecotherapy training with my fantastic team.